Good evening and welcome to the February 17th school committee meeting. Gonna take attendance. I am Robin Briggs, acting chair as Carrie's not here, and Mark Conroy
Here.
and Steve Catalano.
Here.
And we also have Superintendent Mulaney and
Yeah.
Terry Wiggin with us tonight. So tonight we're going to go over the COVID-19 updates from the CDC, just so that everybody is aware of where Millis stands in them and how we are in terms of the new guidelines, what we're doing to meet them if we haven't met them, which we have, and kind of go over that for you guys. So do we want to talk about them just in general first and read what we've read, or do you want to go specifically and talk about transportation?
Madam Chair, I think we've prepared a letter to go out to all of the listservs and posted on the website. I think maybe it would help if Mr. Conroy started to kind of review the letter that he helped put together, and we can kind of go from there and then touch upon some specifics as we go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. So,
Okay.
Mr. Conroy, would you like to start?
All right. Well, as everybody's aware, to some degree, just through news, etc. Last Friday, February 12th, the CDC came out with what has been deemed as the first national attempt at guidelines for all districts across the country in order for schools to open. Now, the first piece of that, I think that's important that we outline in there, is the definition of open. And really, according to the CDC, the definition of open is any amount of in-person learning. So, I think a lot of what we've seen in the press, especially the last month or so, is, schools need to open, et cetera. One thing that's kind of been lost and hadn't been defined in various places is what is open. And, via comments that President Biden has made, his press secretary has made, and then through the CDC guidelines, that there is no maximum or minimum requirement in terms of what they're deeming open. If you have students coming into the building in any way, you are open. So the Millis schools are open and have been open since mid-October. What it also stipulated is what 5 mitigation strategies schools should implement in order to open. Requirement of universal and correct use of masks. Physical distancing of at least 6 feet should be maximized to the greatest extent possible. Hand washing, respiratory etiquette, cleaning and maintaining healthy facilities, and contact tracing. Throughout the document, it mentions multiple times that the first two, the most important of them is, in order for schools to open, is the requirement of universal requirement of masks and the physical distancing. As we've gone through, we as a school committee set the policy of mandatory masks for all grades, all personnel in the school and on school grounds back in late summer, August, September, before we opened. And also we set the policy that the district would maintain 6 feet distancing throughout, also in September. And what came out in the CDC guidelines actually firmed up really that discussion between 3 and 6 feet. In my opinion, you read it, there are multiple instances where it says at least 6 feet. There's no mention of anything less than 6 feet called out in the document as to what is the best mitigation strategy. It also does say specifically, I'll just pull it out. And the document is actually linked in what we'll send out, but in the executive summary, the last sentence under in the vaccination paragraph, it says, even after teachers and staff are vaccinated, schools need to continue mitigation measures for the foreseeable future, including requiring masks in schools and physical distancing. So even in this document, even after teachers and staff can be vaccinated, we're still supposed to follow the 5 mitigation strategies that they've laid out. The other thing that the new guidelines established, which somewhat similar to what the state had done, the state of Massachusetts had done in terms of color coding based on community transmission. They've established community transmission at low, moderate, substantial, and high. Now, right now, as of the report that came out last Thursday night, Millis is moderate, which allows, what they were say is that allows for in-person learning to the extent possible following the other mitigation strategies. If you go back to pretty much the whole month of January into February, we were actually at a substantial transmission just for the town. And then basically we've been moderate since mid-November. So right before Thanksgiving and the holiday and that second surge. So we have not been a low community since the beginning of November. But again, even low communities, the recommendation is for all levels of community spread that physical distancing of 6 feet or more to the greatest extent possible is maintained in school buildings. On the flip side, and going to kind of identifying how we as a district have managed, what's going on in the community versus what we can mitigate even further and manage in the school buildings. The guidelines say that if you're a substantial or high transmission community, all of your extracurricular activities should be outdoors or virtual. And if these guidelines had been issued and we had been enforcing those, our winter sports season wouldn't have happened, because we would have been in the substantial category, as would most of the state, the whole time. So I think, as we've gone through this throughout this year, I think with the work of the Health and Safety Committee, which is the Board of Health, our nurses, the administrators, kind of creating this balancing act of what we know really on the ground in the building and how we're doing managing it, while being mindful of the broader guidelines, has allowed us to stay open, with the exception of a few days here or there, really just Clyde Brown, we've been able to stay open, which is reiterated a couple different times in this guideline. Is the goal is not just to open, but it's to open and stay open. And so lastly, really as we continue to explore expanding in-person learning, the committee is committed to continuing the protocols and the policies that are in place until such time as these guidelines are changed. And I think that's an important communication for the community, as well as understanding that we've been doing it. The way we've been doing it has actually worked, is in line with the guidelines, and has allowed us to stay open. So that's kind of the summary and gist of what's in the statement. without reading it word for word. So I'll open it up to Steve and Robin if they want to add anything or questions.
Mark, I think you did a great job. It was good to know that we basically got some validation that what we had been planning and discussing since July, we were doing the right thing. And it would have been nice to have some clearer information coming out of the federal government to the state governments to us. But there's been a couple of times where it's been not necessarily at odds, but it hasn't been clear what the guidance is. So I do appreciate the opportunity by the new administration to kind of clarify and to kind of validate what we've been doing. And I just want to reiterate what you said, is that from day one, we have strived to put as many kids in the building as possible, and also to make sure and to ensure that the health and safety of everyone in the building, the children, the adults, we try to maintain that. And there has been a tremendous amount of work by administrators on this call, teachers, other staff, support staff. A lot of work has been done to stay open, and then to stay open. So I don't need to reiterate everything you said, but we're continuing to strive to add as many kids into the building in a safe manner that is in coordination and adherence of the guidelines.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that the administration is constantly looking at keeping everyone safe, what they can do to update, what they can do to get more kids in. And it's a constant ongoing kind of look into how we can make this year work safely for everybody, the teachers and the students.
Yeah, and I think, Steve and Robin both mentioned the teachers, and I also especially, seeing things in the papers and in the news over the last week more than any, but I think at a national level and even maybe at a broader state level, it seems that the narrative is starting to turn between this battle between, teachers unions and other policy making bodies, whether it's federal or state. Just a reminder that all of our Millis teachers, with unless there are underlying health conditions, all of our teachers have been in the building coming to work since October, since we opened. Our teachers union has never taken the stand that everyone needed to be vaccinated to come in. So again, it goes, in my opinion, it goes to this broader narrative that we're seeing that Millis doesn't really fit into. Millis has been open. Our teachers are coming to work. They're not mandating vaccines before we can open. So some of this larger news that's out there isn't indicative of what's going on here.
Yeah, I think there's a great relationship with the Millis Teachers Association and the school and the administrators. Right. Do Bob and Terry, do you guys have anything that you want to say about the guidelines specifically before we jump into the update on in-person learning, or with regards to anything?
Well, no, I don't think the CDC guidelines, I didn't see any earth-shattering change in those
from what we were already doing. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to give us an update on the in-person learning and moving more kids in, Bob?
Sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. So as increasing in-person learning, we're looking at it in two ways. We're looking at grades K-2 coming in full in-person, phasing that in, while at the same time in grades 3 through 12, getting more students in where there's space available. So I'll start out with our K-2 plans. as they are right now. When students come back from February vacation, during the week of February 22nd, families with students in grades K to 12 will be getting information from Ms. Django and the Clyde Brown Elementary School on details, a detailed plan of back to school in person for grades K to 2. Again, it's going to be staggered. A presentation will be provided for families in grades K to 2 via Zoom on March 1st at 6 p.m. Also on that day, a survey will be emailed to families of students in grades K to 2 requesting a commitment for fully in-person or fully remote learning for the remainder of the year. So they'll have a week to look at the information and decide how they want to proceed with their for their student. So it'll be fully in person, and when I say fully in person, I mean 4 days a week, or it will be fully remote. This survey, the data from this survey will be reviewed to see exactly how many kids we need to fit into the classrooms for the in-person learning. And we'll have to use that information to see how that will impact drop-off, pickup, transportation, lunches, recess. So this information will be very helpful in helping us determine the protocols. That's why we'll need a firm commitment in that survey. And over the summer, we had done some surveys with families, and some of the surveys were done really before families had all the information. So we want to get them the information out next week so that they can really make an informed decision. And then from that informed decision, we can start our planning and all those logistical questions from updating Power School to figuring out bus stops to lunches and everything in between. The plan is to begin in-person learning in grade 1 on April 5th. Monday, April 5th, we'll be having grade 1 students come in. We want to take some time and look at the impact of the additional students in these various areas of the school and the different logistical things. And then following April vacation, we'd like to welcome back grade 2. And the tentative date for that would be April 26th. And then 2 weeks later, we'd be looking at welcoming the kindergarten back. In terms of staffing, because staffing is an issue, we have advertised for a remote teacher to teach a split class of grade 1 and 2 remote students. And we've had some internal candidates for the positions. So we don't believe staffing will be a problem. One thing that I do want people to understand is that there will most likely be some shifting among students and their teachers as we go to full in person. So for example, all the students who are remote, there may be different remote students in different classes right now in K to 2, but those kids will be combined and they'll have their own remote teacher. There may also be some teacher changes because K to 2 classrooms in Clyde Brown can fit about 18 to 20 kids. And if one class has in-person students greater than 20, then we'll have to shuffle some kids around. I understand that is not the ideal to have to change a teacher during the school year. But again, we think that the benefit of 4 days of in-person learning outweigh the drawbacks of that. So we can fit between 18 and 20 kids, kind of depending on the classroom, with the required 6 feet of distancing. In some classes, if they don't fit in the regular classroom that the kids have been in during the year, we may have to move some classes to some of our larger spaces at Clyde Brown, like the art room and the STEAM lab. And certainly, we will have to take time to notify parents, families of students who will be moving their teacher. And if a classroom is moving to one of those larger spaces, certainly we have to inform the families and the staff of that. Simultaneously to that, and even preceding the K-2 coming in person, in grades 3 to 12, the building administrators and their staff have been working on establishing priority lists of students who will be invited to attend 4 days a week. These priority groups include students with disabilities, who have IEPs, students with 504 plans, English learners, and students receiving tiered intervention supports. The return of these students will also be staggered with those students who have been identified as having the highest needs coming in first, and seeing what the strain is on the system before the next group of high need students comes in. So some of those students will be returning after February vacation, and then, we'll fill out the seats depending on availability through the month of March. And just as an aside, the Clyde Brown students with these high needs would include students from K-2 as well. So before all the K-2 students come back full in person, there may be some K-2 students who are coming back earlier to 4 days a week. The grades 3 to 12, it's with the 6-foot distancing, we're not going to be able to fit all students in the class. We're not going to be able to go 100% full in for those grades 3 to 12. Right now, I think we mentioned it at the last school committee meeting, the middle school cohorts are pretty much full 4 days a week. At Clyde Brown and at the high school, it kind of depends on the grade level. In the high school, it's a little different because in the high school, those students aren't in cohorts. So for example, you could have a student whose English class might have some seats available, but whose math class is full. So if students were to come into the English class, it might impact the math class would be oversubscribed, or some other class might be oversubscribed. So what the high school administrators and staff has to do is really look at each individual potential student's schedule to see if they would be able to fit in fully for 4 days a week. So it's a little different at the high school because of the movement of students that we don't have in Clyde Brown and we don't have in the middle school. I appreciated that the committee mentioned the commitment of the teachers in this whole process. And I'd like to just reiterate that the building administrators, the district administrators, and the staff have spent a lot of time working on this. And obviously, we want to get as many students in as possible that we can do safely.
Great. So quick recap for those that want the Cliff Notes is that a survey is coming out for the K-2 parents about whether you want 4 days a week in person or remote. Those are your two options. You cannot choose hybrid. Okay. You might also get a different teacher, whether you choose only remote or only in person. Your child might switch teachers so that we can accommodate the all in person and the all remote. I just want to highlight those things so that people know what we're working on to get kids in the building.
Right. Thank you. And that survey will come out on March 1st. So we want to, families should first look for the information from Ms. Django that should be coming out the 22nd of February. Obviously, if they have questions, they can contact the school if that will help them make their decision. But right, it's all in person or all remote for grades K to 2.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Catalano.
So I know that we are going to be taking a vote on this, and we started the conversation the last couple meetings, and we're voting on this on Tuesday. And ahead of that, I just want to reiterate to the superintendent that from day one, part of our concerns about putting more kids in the building, obviously has been about health and safety, but also about staffing. So I know there are no guarantees, but I really want to explore the additional staff needed and have some assurances that we actually have that staff, because I don't want to start something that is going to burden already burdened teachers and aides and paras. So I think I know you're working hard on this and you've recruited a lot, but if that could be part of the conversation on Tuesday, the reality of the extra staff needed, or how many we need and how many we have assurances on, I think that will help make the decision. And once again, I don't want anything to hold back putting more kids in the building, but if we can't actually do it due to staffing, that's a concern. And I think we need to have the honest conversation on Tuesday and going forward about the impact that staffing has on putting more kids in the building.
Perfectly understandable. Yeah, I'm confident, but I understand we want to make absolutely sure that we have the staffing in place to do what we are proposing and what we want to do.
And we can talk about it more on Tuesday. It's not the first time we've talked about it, but I just think it's important to reiterate that's a vital piece of the decision-making process going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair. Bob, question. So we're asking people to commit all in or all remote for the rest of the year. It's the question that I have is, and maybe there's probably an unstated reality that, if a family's life circumstances change, or, we get, we're sitting in the middle of a February break where, there are families out of town, kids out of town, just like over winter and Thanksgiving. So, probably not to the same degree of then, hopefully not at all. But if for some reason there also becomes some type of third surge or cases, whether they're in the buildings or in the community, some flexibility or some understanding will exist that is not this, you're signing your life away, on February 28th for the next 3 months and there's no room for movement.
Right. I mean, obviously, we'd like to have the numbers as solid as possible because so much hinges on the numbers. But obviously, if there are, extenuating circumstances, certainly we will work with that.
Yeah, like if there's a group of kids that need to quarantine, their
Right,
teacher
absolutely.
will teach them remotely and teach the in-person kids.
Yeah, and that's something that, that's a distinct possibility.
And one thing, just on the community spread, I touched on it a little, not sure I brought it up going over the memo, but again, a difference between even kind of how we've handled the guidelines and tried to manage what's going on. The CDC guidelines talk about community spread as a county. And, they emphasize in multiple places, just because of the limited to no kind of school spread, they look at the community as where the spread is and how that should impact. And it's community spread that they say should drive your transition. Now, we collectively have looked more at, are we able to keep things going in the building? But it's not just what happens in the buildings that matter. It matters what's going on in the community as a whole. So I just think that's important for people to understand. The guidelines say we should be looking at a pretty wide, broad rating that we have adapted to look at it more closely in our own community that's allowed us to do things that strict adherence to guidelines wouldn't have allowed us to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of that got switched up a bit from DESE with like, even if you're red, you can be in as long as there's no school spread. So it's sort of like constantly moving targets. So we're trying to update our procedures with the different information that we're getting from the powers that be that make the rules. Does anyone else have anything that they want to say, chime in, speak about? No, good. Okay, well, that's really all that we have on our agenda, unless anyone has any good news to share.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, Mr. Catalano.
first, I want to thank Mr. Conroy for taking the lead on that letter. And I know it was a joint effort, but he definitely putting paper to pen, that was helpful. And I think that it will be helpful for family members who don't have the opportunity to see this to get that. And I also want to thank the superintendent for coming in on a holiday or a vacation week and putting together a memo and constantly thinking about ways to improve and get more kids in the building. And with that, I would make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Is this a roll call vote or can we just say all in favor?
It's an all in favor because we're not
All in
doing
favor.
anything.
Did you say all in
actually
favor?
ask?
All in favor, all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Good night,
We're
everyone.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.